Hello Pokemon trainers, welcome back to another Pokemon Scarlet and Violet video here on iStarly TV. Today we're doing the top 10 most used Pokemon in Battle Stadium Singles Series 2. So you might have seen that I did a top 5 video. That was only for the top 5 most used Paradox Pokemon in Series 2 so far. This is, again, the top 10 Pokemon, so that is including every Pokemon that is legal in Battle Stadium Singles Series 2, including those Paradox Pokemon. So I probably won't go into too much detail. I'll probably have their kind of info on the screen here, and I'll just kind of talk about them more generally just so the video isn't too long. Anyways, let's start with the countdown here. The top 10 most used Pokemon in Battle Stadium Single Series 2. Coming in at number 10, we have Iron Valiant. Iron Valiant is a great Pokemon, unsurprisingly. And I think the big thing about it is that it's really fast, and it also has a massive physical attack stat, in addition to a really solid special attack stat. On top of that, it has really strong coverage on both ends, and it's typing, it's a fairy and fighting typing, so this thing just really has a lot going for it. Now, over the weeks, it has very slowly dropped down. There was a point where it was the 7th most used Pokemon, and then the 8th, and now it is the 10th most used Pokemon. I do anticipate eventually it'll actually drop out of the top 10. However, again, this is still just a really strong Pokemon, and even if it's not in the top 10, it's still going to be worth using because it has so much offensive pressure. Fairy is also just a really solid type. You know, the Paradox Pokemon have added a couple Pokemon that are resistant to Fairy, notably something like Iron Moth. But aside from that, most other things take either neutral or super effective damage from Fairy type moves, and so that just puts Iron Valiant in a great position. Number 9 is Mimikyu, which has just been one of the best Pokemon in Pokemon period since it was introduced in Pokemon Sun and Moon. Since Sun and Moon, in fact, it was constantly the single most used Pokemon in Battle Stadium Singles. However, in more recent generations, they of course nerfed Disguise because they had to, and also other powerful Pokemon have been introduced, so Mimikyu's not quite as strong as it used to be, but its typing alongside Disguise and its pretty decent move pool just really make it a big threat. And if a team is unprepared for Mimikyu, it can really do a lot of damage and just do a lot of annoying things to the opponent. So Mimikyu deserves a spot on the top 10. I kind of feel like it'll always be in the top 10 most used Pokemon, just simply because of that ability. That ability Disguise is just so amazing. And in 8th place, we actually have Roaring Moon. Roaring Moon started towards the top 5 of the most used Pokemon, and in fact, it was the 3rd most used Paradox Pokemon for a while, but in the previous weeks, it's actually dropped down quite a lot to where it is now 8th place, and it is the 4th most used Paradox Pokemon. So Roaring Moon, it's a really strong Pokemon, don't get me wrong. It hits really hard. It is a terrifying monster. However, I think everything else in the meta has just kind of adapted and risen up. One of the Pokemon that we'll talk about in a little bit has really risen up as just a great Pokemon overall, and I think it does a good job against Roaring Moon. But despite the fact that Roaring Moon is on the downswing, I still think it's worth using because, again, it is really strong. Booster Energy is great on it, Choice Band, Choice Scarf are great on it, you can run Dragon Dance. I mean, there's just so many good options, and it just hits really hard. It's a monster. And in 7th place, we have Iron Moth. This is the Pokemon that I think, or well, one of the Pokemon that I think is going to continue to rise at least a little bit. It might fluctuate in its spot, but I think it'll remain firmly in the middle of these top 10 most used Pokemon. Its typing is great, offensively and defensively. It has almost perfect coverage, and it hits really, really hard. It's also pretty fast as well. This Pokemon really just has it all in a lot of ways, and it's one Pokemon that can kind of switch into Flutter Mane or just take on Flutter Mane without being too afraid of it, and for good reason. This Pokemon is fantastic, and I highly encourage you to use Iron Moth. In 6th place, we have Kingambit. Kingambit is also a Pokemon that I think in the beginning of the metagame, people weren't too aware of how good it is. and people have really woken up to just how strong Kingambit is, both offensively and defensively, with Gholdengo being just one of the best Pokemon in this generation. Kingambit is a pretty solid answer to it. It can resist both of its stab moves really nicely, and it can just do a lot of damage. Sucker Punch is terrifying. Kowtow Cleave is really good. Iron Head, Steel type moves are always good. You know, this Pokemon is just great. It's offensive, it's defensive, it's got a lot of roles it can fill on a team, a lot of different sets it can use. Kingambit's awesome. And now we're in our top 5. In 5th place, we have Baxcalibur. And this Pokemon is the Pokemon that has risen the most over the past few weeks with Series 2. It started towards the bottom 10, or sorry, it started towards the bottom of the top 10. It was around 10th place, 9th place, but over the weeks, it has steadily risen to being the 5th most used Pokemon. And to be quite honest, I would not be surprised if this Pokemon eventually broke into even the top 4 and even possibly the top 3. This Pokemon is very, very good, despite the fact that it's a Dragon and Ice type, which typically is not the best typing, especially defensively. Terastallizing has really helped it. Its ability is amazing. Its stats are insane. This thing is scary. If it can get up a Dragon Dance, it is a nightmare to face, and it typically runs either Terra Electric or Terra Ground, which prevent it from being paralyzed. So it's just a monster, really. I mean, it lives up to its namesake. It looks a lot like Godzilla, and it's just about as terrifying as Godzilla. So kudos to Baxcalibur, the 5th most used Pokemon in Battle Stadium Singles. And number 4 of the top 10 most used Pokemon in Battle Stadium Singles Series 2, February 2023, is Iron Bundle, the Delibird upgrade. I think it's awesome that we have a Pokemon that is basically Delibird, but it's cooler. It's like, you know, that meme where it's like Daniel and the cooler Daniel. I know I've mentioned that in one of my other videos. It's Delibird and the cooler Delibird. And for good reason. This thing is very, very good. This is the 2nd fastest Pokemon in the entire metagame. I mean, Electrode is really fast as well, but who uses Electrode? If you find me someone who uses Electrode, I'll give you, I don't know, a chocolate frog, I don't know. But anyways, yeah, so Iron Bundle is just a great Pokemon. Its move pool is unfortunately pretty limited, but the fact that this thing is so high up in the usage really shows just how good it is. It's extremely fast, it hits pretty hard, it's got great coverage. I guess that's all it needs, right? This is the 4th most used Pokemon, so it's doing something right. Iron Bundle, congratulations, you're number 4. And finally, we're talking about our top 3 most used Pokemon in Battle Stadium Singles Series 2. If you want to play a little game, have a little fun right here, go ahead and, if you want to pause the video and comment below who you think the top 3 most used Pokemon in Battle Stadium Singles are, Series 2, and in which order. So you know the Pokemon I've mentioned so far. You might be thinking of certain Pokemon that you know are really good who I haven't mentioned yet, so you might have an idea of who these Pokemon are. But let me know in the comments who you think the top 3 most used Pokemon are right now. Now that you've done that, let me know if you guessed Gholdengo as number 3. If you did, you are absolutely correct. Gholdengo, unsurprisingly, is one of the top 3 most used Pokemon in Battle Stadium Singles. This Pokemon is just amazing. It's just so good. You know, it's cool that every Ghost and Steel type that we've ever gotten has been just super great. Like Aegislash was always really good, and now Gholdengo takes its place. It hits really hard, it's got a massive special attack stat, it's got a decent speed stat, it's pretty well rounded in its defensive stats, and then its typing is just fantastic. Offensively and defensively, this thing is great. Sometimes all you need are just those 2 moves, Make It Rain and Shadow Ball. And in fact, I think a good reason why Kingambit started rising as highly as it did, as quickly as it did, is because of this Pokemon right here, because Kingambit completely walls both of its stab moves. So that's a reason why Gholdengo has started also using Focus Blast sometimes to be able to hit opposing Kingambits. But this Pokemon is just so good. It can be defensive, it can be bulky, it can be Choice Scarfed and do that really well. It can be Choice Specs. It can also set up with Nasty Plot. It also has access to Recover. Yeah, Gholdengo is amazing. If you haven't used it yet, I highly advise you to. Though I've heard of some players saying that they don't like it, so it's kind of funny, but it's a great Pokemon. Number 3, we've got Gholdengo. And drum roll please, the top 2 most used Pokemon in Battle Stadium Singles Series 2 are, in 2nd place, we have Fluttermane. Fluttermane is, I mean, it shows you just how good this thing is, where it's already in the top 2 Pokemon, in the top 2 most used Pokemon. It's already supplanted Goldango, Pokemon like Goldango, Mimikyu, Excalibur, etc. And just risen through the ranks. This Pokemon is amazing. All you need is an amazing speed stat, an amazing special attack stat, and a great move pool with 2 great stab options in the form of Fairy and Ghost, and you're on your way to just obliterating the metagame. This Pokemon has so few switch-ins. Sure, there are Pokemon that can take hits from this thing decently well, but honestly, not a whole lot. There aren't too many great special tanks in the meta. I could see a Pokemon like Clodsire starting to rise up in usage because of it, although this thing also gets Psyshock. But yeah, I mean, there's just not that many things that can switch into this, and this thing is faster than almost everything in the meta. Of course, the only 2 Pokemon that are faster than it are Iron Bundle and Dragapult, and otherwise, this thing is just top-notch. Top-notch. Hits so hard, it's very fast, and it can run a variety of items that make it even faster or hit even harder. So Fluttermane is the way to go. I highly advise using it. It's a great Pokemon. If you don't really like Pokemon like Goldango or Dragapult, this thing is arguably just straight up better and easier to use. And finally, we have our #1 most used Pokemon in Battle Stadium Single Series 2. If you're familiar with the format, if you're familiar with the metagame, you've been playing a lot, you probably know what Pokemon it is by now, because there's a Pokemon that's really good and seen on a lot of teams that I haven't mentioned yet, and that's this Pokemon right here. Dragonite is the king of Battle Stadium Single Series 2, and I don't anticipate that changing anytime soon. There might come a point where Dragonite is dethroned, maybe by Fluttermane, maybe by Goldango, even maybe by something else, but I just cannot imagine a world where Dragonite is not in the top 10 most used Pokemon in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet Battle Stadium Singles. This is the generation for Dragonite, and I love it. I mean, Dragonite is obviously one of the oldest Pokemon. It was introduced in the very first generation of Pokemon, and it's always been pretty good. I mean, I feel like there have been some generations where it's been better than others, but like I said, there's never really been a generation where it was like the single best Pokemon, and I love that that's the case. I love Dragonite. It's so cool. I love Dragonite. It's one of my favorite Pokemon, but then when you play against it in Scarlet and Violet, sometimes it's a little annoying, because multi-scale is just such a fascinating ability, and something that further makes it even better is the fact that you can Terrasilize, so you can change your type, meaning you can predict the opponent to go for a certain move and change your type so that you're not weak to it, etc. You also, Terra Normal is its most common Terra type with extreme speed, so you get that extra boost of damage. This thing is just, it can be a setup sweeper, it can be a choice banded, hard-hitting Pokemon with extreme speed and Terra Normal, it can be a bulky Dragon Dance setup sweeper, it can be just a bulky, super annoying Pokemon, so it can be a defensive Pokemon. It has Roost, it has Thunder Wave, it has Fire or Spin. It has so many options for what it can do, and its stats really complement that as well. And Dragonite is the king. Dragonite is the king of Battle Stadium Singles, and like I said, I don't anticipate that to change unless we eventually get a metagame where, like in Sword and Shield, where we start using legendary Pokemon and mythical Pokemon. I think that would be a point where maybe Dragonite would be dethroned, but at the same time, it's just so good that I feel like it's going to be at the top of the metagame, at least in the top 10, probably for Scarlet and Violet's duration, thanks to Terrasilizing. So there you go. Those are the top 10 most used Pokemon in Battle Stadium Single Series 2 as of February 2023. This could change, and it'll be exciting to see this change. And in fact, if there are any big changes to the meta, I'll probably make another one of these videos. But I like making these videos. I like talking about the metagame because I've been having so much fun in Battle Stadium Singles. And again, if you've been playing a lot of it, you'll probably agree that a lot of these Pokemon are just really, really good. So let me know what you thought of the top 10 list. Did you completely see all it coming? Did you predict all of these correctly? Are there Pokemon who you see a lot who you think should be in the top 10? Also, make any hot take predictions. Which Pokemon do you think is capable of dethroning Dragonite? Which of these Pokemon do you think is capable of dropping out of the top 10? Just give me all your predictions, give me all your ideas and your thoughts in the comments. I'm really excited to talk about this stuff. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time.